So think about your brain as something that you're moving through all day long, every day, and you have to realize where you are. You also have to realize when you're in the basement, admit that you're in the basement, know that that's not a good place. You've got to get out of the basement, and you've got to bring everybody with you.
So then how do you put meta leadership into practice? And we do an exercise in the afternoon of a summit that really puts this into the real world. And there are three themes that are engaged in this exercise. One of them is gaps, one of them is gives, and one of them is gets. Now, in the midst of an emergency, you've got a lot of people who want to be part of helping out, and then you've got a situation. So what the meta leader needs to ask is, what are we doing? What's the situation? And what's the gap between what we're doing and what needs to be the response in the situation? And asks the question, how do I close the gap? Or in other words, if there's an earthquake, what's the situation? How many people need support? How many people are trapped? Whatever that situation is, here's what we have in terms of resources. Then how do we close the gap? Now, you have a wide array of people after an emergency who want to help out, who want to give something. And if you've been able to array those gives before the emergency, you can engage them during the emergency. People might want to give transportation. People might want to give food and water. People might want to give money. And you need to know where those gives are. And in order to give that, people might need to get something. So the person who wants to offer you a bus to help in an evacuation needs credentials for the bus and for the driver. The person who wants to give money needs to know where to send it, how it's going to be used, and how to collect further resources that might be of assistance to you.
Never wait to connect your gaps, your gives, and your gets in the midst of an emergency. That should be in place. That is what you're trying to do. That is the leadership challenge in every city, in every spot in the United States. How do you put these three sectors together? How do you put all the resources together that when you need them, they seamlessly come together?
What we're hoping to achieve is when an event does happen, that the community will be resilient, that people within the community will be resilient, and that our country can be resilient.
The way we look at resiliency is there's our normal functioning, what we do every day, our normal daily life, and then some disaster occurs. And what happens is there's a big dip from our normal functioning. Something changes. We can't do certain things. We're deprived of certain things. And what happens is that curve gradually comes back up to normal. Now, it can take a long time to come back up to normal, like we saw in Katrina, or it can come up very rapidly. Another thing, the more you practice resilience, the more we see resilience, sometimes you can actually come and surpass normal. You get better. We have to learn from others. We hopefully will not have to learn on our own ground, in our own territory. So we have to look at other countries, we have to look at other places, and we even have to look at places in the United States.
You might live in a neighborhood where people say hello to one another, they ask about one another, they know one another. Well, in the midst of an emergency, that is a neighborhood where people will inquire, help out, be there for one another. And that's an example of social cohesion. We can have cohesion within our neighborhood, within a faith-based organization, within our community. And the whole point then of the Meta Leadership Summit for Preparedness is to provide that opportunity from leaders from many, many different sectors who might not have had that kind of connectivity or those sorts of linkages to come together to build the social cohesion of the community so that it's available during an emergency. So the 4 steps that we look at and that need to be considered in building coherence is that first, that preparedness phase, building the connectivity, communicating, educated, and knowing where are the resources and assets in our community so that if we need them, we can call upon them and use them in an emergency. Right after the moment of the emergency, you might have to move people quickly. For example, if it's a hurricane or an earthquake, there might be a need for an evacuation. Immediate life-saving, saving lives is what's the first priority during an emergency, and then being able to protect property after that. If people see that the right actions were taken in that first moment of the emergency, they'll be more resilient down the road. In the short term, there might be people who have been displaced, who need shelter and feeding. You need to reduce the stress of those people who are caught in the middle of the event, and then reassure people that we've been able to restore order and that you can continue leading a safe life. And then in the long run, being able to rebuild a community, being able to get people in place, to be able to have the confidence to move forward, is critical in a community really coming back, or as Barry just said, even having more strength on the other side of an event.
The first responders are the people at the scene. The first responders are not the police, the fire, EMS. They are not. They are the second responders. The first ones are the people at the scene. So we need to build social cohesion within our society. That will create resiliency, and we need to put the three sectors together.
We thank you for your attention to this short presentation, and even more importantly, we thank you for your meta leadership. We'll be a stronger country, and we'll have stronger communities if people are willing to stand up, to be intentional, and take the initiative. And that's what we hope will be the impact of our Meta Leadership Summits around the country.